Hey guys, welcome back to We're Talking Movies. This is Cade, joined by Andrew. Today we are going to be continuing our favorite movies series, and for today we are going to be going through Andrew's top five favorite movies of all time. Andrew, let's start off with your number five. For number five, we have Terminator 2, Judgment Day. So this movie is often regarded as one of the best action and sci-fi movies ever made. What is it about this film that makes it stand out among both genres? Is it the storyline, characters, action sequences, ambition?
Oh, that is a really good question. And for me, it's the characters and the storyline. Reason I say that, the storyline is it basically takes what was established in the first Terminator and ups the stakes. Because now, okay, they're sending in even more. Yes, they're still trying to kill John Connor, but now they've sent this incredibly scary, even more advanced Terminator to go after him. But now there's also this original T-800 that's been sent back at the same time to protect John Connor. So again, it's twice the Terminators. The action sequences are bigger with some truly instant classic action sequences. In my opinion, the bike chase at the beginning of the movie is the highlight for me. So there's also the fight between the two Terminators at the end. There's the shootout out with the minigun. It takes the idea of the Terminator in that kind of existential futuristic doom and just ups the stakes.
Well, and for this to be one of your favorite movies, I can assume that you must also like it more than the original. So, for you as such a big fan of this movie, what do you think makes it better than the first one? And what do you think it does so well that other sequels don't do?
Well, I think number one is it does a really good job at continuing the storyline. And by that I mean it picks up a while after the first one took place. Because John Connor is what, 10, 12 in this movie now? And obviously the original Terminator ends with Sarah Connor being pregnant with John. So obviously some time has passed, but it kind of fills in what happened in that decade in between without spending too much time explaining. And then it basically just goes from there and it does its own thing. It's got a bigger, grander scale because the original Terminator is more of a sci-fi thriller, in my opinion. This is much more of an action flick because it's got again the big, very choreographed action sequences. It's got the better special effects than the original did. It again the fact that the effects on the T1000 still to this day still look phenomenal is a major credit to this movie. Yeah, it takes what made the original Terminator great and just does more of it, which I know sounds like a really simple concept, but a lot of movies just don't seem to stick that land of let's just do what made the first one great, give it maybe a different story, and just do more of it.
Well, and moving on to my next question. So, James Cameron has obviously made some really great movies over his career. Aside from this and the original, there's also other classics like Aliens, there's Avatar, there's also Titanic, which he won Best Director and Best Picture for. For this to make your top five, would you argue that this is actually James Cameron's best film? Because I know many people often consider Titanic to be his best one.
That's a really good question. Yeah, I would say this is probably his best movie because yes, this I just said this movie basically takes the original Terminator and just does more of it, and yeah, it's a bigger movie scale wise, but it's not so big and so grandiose like some of his other movies he's that you mentioned are, which is actually why I'm not as big of a fan of Titanic and Avatar compared to this. Honestly, that's probably why I really like Aliens so much as well, is because yes, it took the original Alien and just did more of it. He basically just did the same thing here, except he wasn't taking over the reins from a different director. But yeah, no, James Cameron in like more recent films, again, it just stuff tend to be feel almost too big. Like I don't know, it's the runtime or just the amount of characters you got to keep track of or just the scale of the movie. It just all feels too big. This, yes, it's bigger, but it doesn't ever feel, oh my God, there's just too much to keep track of.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. Well, tell you what, why don't we move on to your number four? And that is Avengers Endgame from 2019. This movie is definitely a love letter to the first 10 years of the MCU, which it succeeds in very well. Aside from all the fan service and nostalgia that the film has, what about the overall story of this movie makes it stand out so well among other superhero films?
Um, Again, that is a really good question. I think what makes it stand out so well is just the sheer gut punch story moments that this movie has. Because obviously, yes, this is a very big fun movie, but there's also some really damn sad moments in this movie. You got the death of Hawkeye's family, you got Black Widow making her heroic sacrifice, and then out here and then it's like, oh, we at the very end of the movie, like, oh, we defeated Thanos, and then it's like, oh, Iron Man died. It's got a again, it's got a very emotional heart to it, and I think just the fact that this is a movie about fixing mistakes because again, Thanos won after Infinity War. He did what he accomplished to, which was destroying half of the universe. So this is the Avengers effectively dealing with how do we recover from such a major defeat? We lost. We're responsible for half of the universe dying effectively. So the fact that they have to regroup and deal with that and guilt, which they deal with in different ways. Obviously Thor goes on his downturn. Iron Man kind of tries to move on, have a somewhat normal life. Captain America has to Captain America has to freaking go to therapy. So the fact that it is again, it's about going back, fixing mistakes, and then finding a way to fix your mistake and then accomplishing it, I think is what makes it very different from other superhero flicks.
Well, and also just speaking of the characters in general, many characters in this movie have their moments to shine. And were there any moments in particular in this movie that really stood out for you most?
That is a great question. And this gives me a chance to basically explain why this movie's in my top five. Because, in all honesty, there are movies I like more than this. But that one sheer cathartic moment of On Your Left coming through Cap's earpiece, 10 years of introducing characters, interweaving stories, different directors, different casts, different storylines, different teams of superheroes coming together for that one cathartic moment where everything's tied together. For me, that one moment, I felt like when I was seeing this in theaters, everybody was on their feet yelling and screaming at that one moment. And I'm thinking to myself, this must be what kids who grew up with Star Wars or kids who grew up with the Harry Potter movies must have felt like at their climax, because I grew up with the MCU. So just that one pure cathartic moment is almost solely why this is in my top. Don't get me wrong, I still love this movie, but if it wasn't for that, I don't think this would be in my top five. So this is just a sheerly emotional pick for me for being in my top five. Just that one pure moment.
Oh, yeah, I totally get what you mean. And, obviously, we saw multiple characters from the MCU die in this movie, characters such as Iron Man, Black Widow, and even Thanos. And I'm curious, do you like how the movie wrapped up all their stories, or is there anything that you would have done differently with it?
Well, obviously Thanos dying, that just feels satisfying. He did kill half the universe, so seeing a villain of that caliber get defeated is always satisfying.
And are you also satisfied that Tony Stark was the one who did it when he snapped his fingers?
Yes, and that also leads me into why I find it, while it was more than a little bit of a gut punch at how sad it was. The fact that Iron Man was the guy who got to defeat Thanos is perfect in my opinion, because we had been teased with the idea of Tony sacrificing himself to save the world basically in every other Avengers movie. Plus he had that prophecy in Age of Ultron where, he would fail. So the fact that we got both of those threads tied up in his sacrifice for this case in this movie is why I do like how they handled it. Black Widow, that was the one that genuinely shocked me when I saw this movie the first time, because yeah, this had come out, but they had also announced, oh yeah, we're doing the Black Widow movie coming out. So I'm thinking, oh, they're not going to kill off Black Widow, and then they did, and I'm like, okay, they just killed off one of the original six. But yeah, no, this is for the most part, I really like how they handle killing off all these characters.
All right, well, moving on to your third favorite movie of all time. Next up, we have the original Alien. So, this movie is now 45 years old. As a horror film and as a movie in general, what about it do you think still makes it hold up to this day?
For me, let's start off with just the very cramped nature of this movie. The fact that you're, with the exception of only a couple of scenes towards the beginning, you are really trapped in a very tight, confined spaceship for the majority of this movie. So as a result, there's no real, and the fact that it's also in the bowels of deep space, you are trapped in there with whatever her horror managed to sneak onto the ship. So that kind of tight, cramped feel is one of the aspects that makes this movie hold up so well, in my opinion. And the other two, as we discussed when we did our top five favorite horror movies of last year, please go watch that video, is I got to talk about Ellen Ripley. What do I need to say? She's one of the best protagonists, not just in sci-fi film history, but just in film history in general. She takes she realizes that, she's effectively got to survive and she's kind of in charge now. And she's been, sent on a suicide mission. She grabs the bull by the horns and takes commands like, I'm going to survive this. And just that pure badass performance by Sigourney Weaver is what cements it. Again, Ellen's a great protagonist and is still, in my opinion, one of the best his protagonists in film history. So there's that. And then the third aspect is just how instantly iconic the xenomorph is as a monster. Now, it's based on its design, and its designer was actually the painter H.R. Geiger, who, funnily enough, after I got into the Alien franchise, I actually then became a fan of his paintings because he has a very distinct style, shall we say, where he likes to combine biological anatomy with machinery or things that normally wouldn't go together. But just that insectile and long, lanky design with and plus the fact, just stuff like the acid blood or the double mouth just makes it such a instantly iconic and honestly really scary movie monster.
Well, in looking back at the film, have there ever been any scenes in the movie that frightened you most when you were younger, or possibly still frighten you to this day?
Well, for me, there was two that always come to mind. One is Kane's death with the chest burster, because that was the first time we'd seen it, and the fact that none of the cast was actually told what was going to happen, so that reaction of him that they give is actually like completely genuine. Plus, nobody knew what the chest burster was going to look like, so that's genuine surprise and real terror on the cast's face. That for me is always going to be an iconic, scary scene. But funnily enough, that is actually not the scene that scared me the most in this movie. No, the scene that scared me the most in this movie is towards the end when Ripley is on the escape pod, and she kind of leans back against the wall trying to catch her breath for a second, and then the xenomorph moves because it had been blending into the background. That caught me off guard the first time, and honestly, it still does when I rewatch it now.
And apart from being considered one of the best horror films of all time, I've seen it listed as one of the best movies ever made as well. Although we both agree that it is one of the best horror movies ever made, do you think it deserves that title as one of the greatest films ever made?
Ooh. I'm going to say yes because it is that well made. Again, it's got great characters, it's got great set design, it's got really good writing, really good acting, and really good special effects that still hold up to this day. Now, mind you, some of the technology looks a little dated, but the effects that really matter, i.e., the monster effects, again, still holds up phenomenally to this day. And the fact that it's actual animatronics and puppets as opposed to just soulless CGI, I think definitely helps.
Well, and this is also one of the many great films by director Ridley Scott. He's also made movies like Gladiator, Blade Runner, Black Hawk Down, American Gangster, The Martian. Has he ever been one of your favorite directors?
That's actually a really, really good question. And upon first thought, I wouldn't have said yes. But now that again, listing what you just listed, Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, and especially, in my opinion, The Martian. Yeah, those are all movies I really love. But until you kind of put that list in front of me, I never actually considered that. Yeah, I guess Ridley Scott is technically one of my favorite directors.
All right, well, moving on to your second favorite movie of all time, we have Ocean's 11. So this is definitely a classic heist film, and for you as a big fan of this movie, what do you think makes the concept of the movie so unique when comparing it to other heist films?
Well, for me, one of the things that makes it so unique is the fact that they don't tell you the plan in advance. So you don't really know the twists and turns of the plot until you're watching it unfold and unfold when they're actually performing it. So I think that's definitely one unique aspect of this movie. And plus, the fact is, this movie, I can't really describe it, but it has just such a natural sense of cool. It's got such a slick script. It's got such slick, well presented characters. It's just got such a natural cool factor. And a lot of movies try to do that, but very few succeed. And the only ones I can really think off the top of my head, this, the John Wick movies, Drive with Ryan Gosling, and that's kind of it. Just that such natural slickness without seeming like you're trying too hard. And then the fact that it's take that cool factor and tie it to the glitz and glamour of Las Vegas as a heist flick, I think is what also makes it so unique. Because usually, usually it's a heist flick. Oh, it's some generic big bank, or it's a gold depository. It doesn't have that kind of neon glitz to it.
Well, and the movie also has a large variety of characters and great performances to it, and great performances by every actor in the cast. As a big fan of this movie, are there any characters or performances that are your favorites?
For me, well, let's start off with Danny Ocean himself. He's just got played by George Clooney, which again, perfect casting choice. Perfect casting choice. He's this kind of scheming criminal mastermind who has done bad things, but you can't help but root for because he's just got such a again, he's got such a cool factor to him. Linus Caldwell, played by Matt Damon, is another one that sticks out to me because he's this presented as this very wet behind the ears, trying to prove he can hang with the big boys kind of thief. And then by the end of the movie, he has proven himself. because he does play a major role in the big heist at the end and pulls it off. Another one I need to bring up is Saul, just because just because he's such a grumpy, like, why did you pull me out of retirement? I was I was decently happy where I was, and then he gets told, "Oh yeah, you get to spend the next couple of weeks, living the high life as some billionaire businessman." He's like, "Oh, I can do this." Just that abrupt change in tone. But yeah, no, just a lot of really good characters in this movie. And the fact that everybody gets their moments to shine throughout the course of it is another thing that makes it so good, in my opinion, because nobody kind of gets left in the background.
Well, and obviously, you're not as big of a fan of all the sequels as you are to this movie. And for a lot of people, sometimes underwhelming sequels kind of ruin the value of the original for them. Has the quality of the sequels ever cheapened the quality of this movie for you?
No, for me, because honestly, okay, I'm not a huge fan of Ocean's 12, but honestly, Ocean's 13, I'm a pretty big fan of, and Ocean's 8, I thought was a pretty solid hood entry as well. I'm kind of surprised they never followed up on that one. But yeah, no, yeah, no, again, the sequels weren't never as good as the original in this franchise. Yeah, no, but they never did anything to kind of taint the original. It's kind of like what we discussed with you in The Matrix and your favorite top five favorite movies of all time. Yeah, the sequels aren't as good, but yeah, no, they don't really do much to take away from the original, in my opinion. This is just a really good, well written, well acted heist flick, and it's infinitely rewatchable too.
Yeah, totally. But why don't we move on to your favorite movie of all time, a movie that we've already reviewed, and that is Jaws. So I have to ask, do you remember your first experience watching this movie? If so, what do you remember about it? Were you instantly hooked into the film? Were you not as interested on your first watch?
I vividly remember my first time watching this, and there's actually a bit of a funny story attached to that. I was in college doing my laundry, watching this on my laptop, and I got so invested in this movie so damn quick, I actually forgot to move my laundry from the washing machine to the dryer. So then I had to sit there for an extra hour that I didn't expect to have. But no, that was my first time watching this, and I was just instantly hooked on this movie because it is just that good, and it is still that good.
Well, and also, as your favorite movie, has it ever had an impact on you both as an audience member and as a person, considering how you're a marine biologist?
That's a really good question. Honestly, it hasn't had as much of an effect as you would expect because, again, I was already studying to be a marine biologist when I first saw this movie. It's not like, oh, I watched this and then I was inspired to be one. Honestly, really, the only effect it's had on me and my professional life is just kind of pointing out all the scientific inaccuracies in it. Like just the fact that a great white shark of that size, even at that size, wouldn't have the strength to pull a full size boat behind it, and just the fact that just other stuff like that.
Well, and when it comes to growing up with movies that we consider our favorites, we can definitely start to appreciate certain things about them as we get older. What was it about this movie that you really started to appreciate more as you sort of got older? Is it the story, the characters, the effects, the score, Spielberg's direction?
For me, it's the characters and the direction because the special effects have not aged horribly well. There's a reason why they didn't show the shark as much as they did because it doesn't look that great and probably didn't look that great back in the 70s. But for me, again, the two main things that I've grown to love more and more is the characters and the direction. Spielberg, basically his direction for this movie was let's make an incredibly isolated monster movie because even before they get on the orca for the last act of this movie, they're on an island. There's very little resources they have to fight this thing, and it's killing people, and it doesn't. So the shark is killing people and doesn't show any signs of stopping. So what would the natural reaction be to that? Well, there's going to be panic. There's going to be people looking to their leaders for help, and then the leaders doing the exact wrong thing with it. So then, somebody's got to, make the right decision. In this case, it's Chief Brody. It's like, okay, we're gonna, I'm taking command because clearly you're screwing this up so bad. And that actually leads into the characters. That main trio of Hooper, Quint, and Brody. Just they work so damn well because they're just polar opposites of each other. Quint is a polar opposite from Hooper. Hooper is a polar opposite from Brody. Brody's a polar opposite from Quint because Brody, he's selfless. He's kind of, he's a blue collar everyman, but he knows he's got his responsibilities to protect the people of Amity. Hooper, yeah, he knows exactly what he's talking about when it comes to sharks because he's, ultra educated, but he's also a yuppie. He thinks he's the smartest man in the room, whom knows exactly what to do. And then you got Quint, who is, very emotional and kind of impulsive, but does have reason to be, but also has the knowledge and the expertise to kill the shark. So the fact that you got that perfect triangle of responsibility, the intelligence, and the means is what makes it such instantly a great trio of characters, in my opinion. I just really love this movie, and I kind of find putting that into words to be difficult. I've kind of had that issue across this entire episode.
Well, and just to close this up, for a movie that is 49 years old, there are many things about it that still hold up to this day. And do you think that maybe 30 years from now, it'll still hold up as a film? Also, do you think it'll still be your favorite movie of all time?
Probably it would take something seriously well made to knock this off of my number one. As for would it still hold up in 30 years, I think it will. I think it will because I think this is just one of those movies that it's so simple, but it's so timeless. Plus, it's got stuff that will stand the test of time, like the instantly iconic quotes. And of course, the score. The score is always going to be instantly iconic for this movie. So, yeah, I think it will still hold up in 30 years' time.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, guys. Well, that has been Andrew's five favorite movies of all time. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram, Threads, and Twitter. And we will see you later.